Good morning. It's Friday, February 28th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 511 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back to the FDD Morning Brief. If you're a regular listener or watcher, you have a good sense of the format of this show, even if you can't necessarily predict what's going to come out of my mouth next. Well, today we're shaking things up just a little bit. My colleague Bradley Bowman recorded an incredible interview with Adam Tarsi from the Pentagon's Irregular Warfare Technical Support Directorate. And the conversation ran a touch longer than usual. That means you're going to get a little less hot air from yours truly. Not too much less, but you definitely want to hear this conversation in full. So stay tuned for that in just a few shakes of a camel's tail. Well, the Israeli military just concluded its investigation into October 7th. As you can probably imagine, it wasn't pretty. Turns out the security establishment botched some pretty big things, including understanding the very threat of Hamas, even in the hours leading up to the 10/7 attacks. We've all heard the criticism for a country with the remarkable intelligence capabilities that Israel boasts. This was a colossal collapse of the entire intelligence community across the board. Not one of Israel's spy agencies looked good after October 7th. But here's something you don't hear too many people say out loud. It's something that senior Israeli officials have told me in private conversations during my visits to the country over the last 16 months. Israel got lucky on October 7th and in the days and weeks that followed. Had the attack gone according to Yahya Sinwar's plan, Israel would have sustained a ground assault by Hezbollah in Lebanon with additional missile and drone attacks from across Iran's entire axis of terrorist proxies. In other words, had Hamas properly coordinated with its allies on that fateful day, Israel could have been vanquished. At minimum, the casualty count would have been much higher and territory could well have been lost. I'm not saying that I think 10/7 was a good thing. It wasn't. But looking back, there are silver linings and the Israelis should feel fortunate. Let's hope the country takes the 10/7 probe to heart because from the looks of things, there is at least one more phase of this war to fight. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, the Iran sanctions keep on coming. On Wednesday, the Treasury Department imposed sanctions on 6 companies involved in Iran's drone procurement network. Here's the interesting part. The companies are all based in Hong Kong and China. They're what we call cutouts, and they've been obtaining drone components for a sanctioned Iranian firm and its subsidiary. Both work for Iran's drone and ballistic missile programs. But wait, there's more. As the State Department noted in its press release, Iran produces drones and missiles for Russia for use against Ukraine. And guess what? Beijing is also a conspirator. It's almost as if there's an axis of aggressors out there. Anyway, responding to the sanctions, a spokesperson for China's embassy in Washington said that Beijing's cooperation with Tehran is perfectly sensible and legal. I guess it depends on what laws you follow or how much sense you have. Headline 2, Israeli authorities arrested yet another Israeli citizen accused of spying for Iran. What's going on here? The suspect this time is 26 years old. The Shin Bet and Tel Aviv District Police arrested him earlier this month for graffitiing the Israeli cities of Petah Tikva and Rosh Ayin at the request of his Iranian handlers. The graffiti included a rendering of Hamas's inverted red triangle and a reference to a 7th century Muslim siege against Jewish tribes. The suspect, or maybe we just call him an Iran-backed vandal, reportedly received a generous $7,000 for his services. I'm curious how much Banksy gets for his graffiti. I think this is probably pretty close. But it wasn't just harmless graffiti. The Iranians also asked the suspect to take photos of Ronan Bar's home. Bar is the head of the Shin Bet, the Israeli equivalent of the FBI. Ironically, one of the suspect's handlers reportedly used the alias Roni Bar while communicating with the suspect, who, by the way, also offered to photograph the home of former IDF Chief of Staff Benny Gantz. Prosecutors indicted the 26-year-old yesterday on the charge of contact with a foreign agent. And headline 3, a car ramming attack unfolded at a bus stop near the Israeli city of Caesarea yesterday. 13 people were wounded. A 17-year-old girl sustained critical injuries. A spokesman for the Israeli police said that after ramming into pedestrians at the bus stop, the attacker slammed into an officer and his car a few hundred meters away. Authorities identified the perpetrator as 53-year-old Jamil Zayud. He was from the West Bank city of Jenin, but had been living illegally in Israel with his wife, who's an Israeli citizen. Police eliminated Zayud at the scene. Hamas predictably cheered on the sidelines, and the terror group released a statement hailing the ramming as an act of heroism and a natural response to Israeli actions in Gaza. All right, it's time to press play on that really fascinating interview with Adam Tarsi and my talented colleague, Brad Bowman. Adam's place of employment, the Department of Defense's Irregular Warfare Technical Support Directorate. That's a mouthful, but it's one of the most important offices in the Pentagon that you've never heard of.
Adam, I want to thank you for joining the Morning Brief. How you doing?
Thank you, Brad. I'm doing great.
Good. Well, I'm really excited to talk with you because, I've known you for years. I've admired your work for years, and you're engaged in activities that I think that are vital to our national security. I think that a lot of Americans don't know about, and frankly, I want them to know it because I'm so impressed by what you're doing. I think it's so important. So let me just kind of start with some basic questions, if I could. What is the Irregular Warfare Technical Support Directorate, where you work? What's its mission, and what makes it unique from your perspective within the U.S. government and the Pentagon?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I love to have a conversation with you, and it has been quite a few years. So I'm really glad that we get to continue this professionally as well. We actually started as the Technical Support Working Group in the Reagan administration. Terrorism had been an increasing phenomenon, dramatically affecting U.S. service members, including 241 service members lost in Beirut in 1983. Coalesced the cabinet around an interdepartmental group on terrorism. And one of the main offshoots of that was a Technical Support Working Group, an entity that could bring that interagency body together and solve problems where they intersected. So you're solving at one time and sharing those capability developments with the community. In 1993, Congress furthered that cooperation, thought that the interagency bit was working pretty well, and suggested, in fact, urged that the department work with NATO and major non-NATO allies. Basically, that meant the Brits and the Israelis knew a lot more about countering terrorism than we did at that point, and we ought to go and learn from them. And I'll talk a little bit about how we built that international program as we step through this conversation. But IWTSD continued that legacy. We evolved it from combating terrorism under Secretary of Defense Chris Miller and moved that into irregular warfare, expanding its focus, really removing the artificial endpoint that was Hezbollah and recognizing that those threats actually reach back to state sponsors of terrorism like Iran and other national entities. Now,
please.
Yeah, I want to talk about the new administration as well, because while it's an enduring organization, I actually believe that we are a blueprint organization for achieving what Secretary of Defense Hegseth's priorities are at a wartime tempo. So our mission for almost 40 years has been rapid, disruptive innovation for both the battle space and the bureaucracy. So we're increasing warfighter lethality and survivability, while also cooperating across the interagency and with international allies to support our defense of the homeland. And these are critical areas that the administration is focused on as well. We are lean and agile. It's a small organization, and that's critical in maintaining that wartime tempo that's necessary as innovations, as technologies evolve so rapidly.
So thanks for that, Adam. What a great rundown. We need a whole lot more time to talk about all the amazing history of your organization. And I worked in the Pentagon for 2 years, and so I saw kind of up close the acquisition processes that just too often take too long and cost too much money. I really admired how your organization just cut through the crud and said, okay, here's what we need. How can we work with our allies and partners, and how can we deliver capabilities to our warfighters so they can accomplish their missions and return home to their families? And I got to say to the viewers, I'm not aware of an organization in the Pentagon that cuts through the crud more effectively and delivers capabilities to our warfighters better than the organization where Adam works. So I'd love for you, if you're willing, what are some of the accomplishments in the past, Adam, that IWTSD has accomplished that you're most proud of?
Yeah, that's frankly a big list, and some of them can be sensitive, so I won't get into too much of the details. But I've grabbed a few examples that I think would be emblematic. We developed a precision strike lethal munition. It actually is an Israeli design, but we used U.S. warhead and U.S. Safe and arm device. So we integrated the two separate technologies, and actually delivered to special operators a unique capability. Further, the company that developed it, a small startup at that point called UVision, decided that there was enough of the U.S. market that they would stand behind, they would commercialize that product, build U.S. manufacturing, and sustain that capability going forward. So they now have the plant in the U.S. for manufacturing. They do the sustainment, the maintenance on these items, and it's transitioned to Special Operations Command under their GOLAM, their Ground Organic Loitering Aerial Munitions Program of Record. So this is the kind of success that for uniquely military items that we work with the established and traditional programs of record, the acquisition executives, so that we can introduce that novel, those innovative capabilities into a structured program. But we also do things like bringing groups together from the interagency. So we've done for years a Southwest Border Counter IED Working Group. It brings together hundreds of both military EOD operators and civilians, public safety bomb technicians to better understand the threats and work together on solutions, sharing information across those spaces. We develop things in publicly available information, started them well over a decade ago, specifically focused on special operators to collect that publicly available information for things like interrogation of targets. But we evolved that in subsequent iterations with a startup called New Wave that formed a new business model around a family of algorithms called tensor completion. But the idea was they would combine with other startups and other private equity-backed firms to form a company called Big Bear AI. Big Bear went public recently and actually rang the bell on the New York Stock Exchange. So from small individual entities partnering up to deliver a massive capability. And a couple other real brief ones, working with cyber tactical operators, or I should say tactical operators, to make them into cyber tactical operators, help to inform their force protection environments digitally. And one other one that I think is a great example is teaching those SOF A teams how to customize the development of small UAS platforms for situational awareness based on the materials they can find in their local environments. So when you send people into a country, they don't have to bring all that kit with them. They are capable and trained of developing based on that local equipment, that local ecosystem.
Thanks for that. What themes that I hear what you're talking about there is really a mission focus and agility and really a working with private industry to cut through the crud again and deliver those capabilities. So I think that's great. You have a concern for a lot of Americans right now is that they want burden sharing. They want our partners to carry their fair share of the load as we protect common interests and go after common adversaries. And I've observed through the years, going back many years of admiring and working with you all, where you have this 50-50 resource model. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mentioned in the beginning that Congress urged us to work with our international partners, and the mechanism for doing so in the Defense Department was really, really slow. It could take you as much as 2 years to develop and staff and get approval for the paperwork just to do a project. We can actually do that in 2 weeks. We've been delegated this unique authority in the Defense Department. And for over 3 years, we've cooperated with Israel, the UK, I mentioned, but also Canada, and in Asia Pacific, Australia, and Singapore. And this unique, equal, and matched resource contribution model means that at the end of the day, U.S. operators get capabilities based on the experience and expertise that our foreign partners possess that is unique from what the U.S. can develop. And we split the cost so that we get those capabilities at half price. I mean, that's an extraordinary statement to make. We get the benefit of the threats that the United Kingdom, that Israel, that Singapore, and Australia, and Canada have faced for 40 years at half price to enrich the technology and the operational understanding that the U.S. has. So when we combine, we're each getting a greater solution at that half price.
Right. So we're benefiting from their technology, they're benefiting from ours, and we're sharing the costs, and we're delivering capabilities to our warfighters and making our partners more capable individually and capable with us together. So that's
and to
great.
give you an idea of the scale that we're talking
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
over the time I've been doing this job, which is admittedly a couple of decades, over $850 million of partner contribution on about 700 operationally relevant projects.
Yeah.
And just our cooperation with Israel is more than the rest of the Defense Department combined, at least in project work.
Yeah, and I know a lot of viewers of this this morning brief are believe, like I do, that Israel is our best ally in the Middle East. And I just have to say, along with the U.S. Israel Operations Technology Working Group, I am not aware of an organization in the Pentagon other than Irregular Warfare Technical Support Directorate that has done more with Israel to get a benefit from their technology and help our warfighters, but help secure the nation state of Israel. So I'd love, what are some of the work through the years with Israel that you might want to highlight there, Adam?
Yeah, I think the bottom line of the cooperation with Israel is that, they were tabbed as the startup nation. When you combine that with the warrior ethos of every individual, every citizen in Israel serving in the national security apparatus after high school, gives them this unique understanding of what their security picture is and how important innovation is in progressing things. We have 407 projects that we've done bilaterally, with 95 of them still in progress, and almost $1 billion in combined resources, just under IWTSD for that kind of cooperation. That's a significant leverage of Israeli expertise and resources. And I'm going to give you one of the flagship examples, and that's our counter-tunnel program. So we started well over a decade ago trying to understand what counter-IED technologies were useful with Israel. And we recognized that there might be some utility in trying to use them to counter tunnels, to detect, maneuver, and functionally defeat them. We put our little bit of funding as a small seed organization, really an accelerator, together with what Congress had then identified. So while Senator Ayotte was in the chair, and her fantastic military advisor recognized the need for cooperation, that the U.S. would benefit from what Israel was doing, but Israel needed some support on the technical side as well. So Congress directed specific resources for this cooperation, and they've continued that support for the better part of a decade. And outside of some niche capabilities, there weren't organizations in the U.S. Defense Department asking for those capabilities. So we went out to Customs and Border Protection and the Border Patrol, where the southwest border had critical threats of subterranean tactical tunnels and transnational organized crime organizations delivering drugs, delivering weapons back and forth. They were our primary customer. When the unspeakable cruelty of October 7th happened, frankly, obviously it surprised everyone. But beginning on October 8th, those bilaterally developed capabilities were pouring into the hands of the IDF for operations in Gaza to rescue hostages, to defeat terror organizations, and to create an environment where Israelis would no longer be threatened. Those capabilities are in partnership with what we did at the border and what we have provided to now numerous U.S. military organizations with missions to operate in both tactical and strategic subterranean environments. Without that cooperation, we almost arrogantly say Israel would not have been able to combat that threat as well as they were. And we would certainly be in no position to combat the threats that we face without Israel's technology and battle lab focus. So it's a partnership that, we were told that 80% of the co-developed solutions were used in that operation in Swords of Iron. That's an extraordinary percentage of relevance, operational relevance. And one last bit, just to keep going on that. Nothing we develop is operationally perfect in a prototype form. But because Israel is essentially, sadly, a big battle lab, as those technologies are used operationally, we are iterating on them instantly. Our agreement, because it can be signed and amended in weeks or even days when necessary, can iterate on those solutions at the speed of operational tempo, at the warfighter's responsibility for continuing their their mission. So that's a unique aspect that IWTSD is blessed with, and that our partners in Israel give us as part of that relationship. So I guess I should pause on that, or else we'll never stop this.
Yeah, no, Adam, thank you for the rundown. Honestly, I've been talking about for years, obviously, I'm proud of the modest role I played, but about the cooperation on terror tunnels. But really, you are the one and your organization, formerly Combating Terrorism Technical Support Office, now you knew IWTSD, that it was working with Israel to make this happen. And I'm so glad that you highlighted how we Americans benefited, that we not only helped Israel detect and destroy the tunnels of Hamas and Hezbollah trying to come in, but they also used that technology, as you said, after October 7th, going into Gaza to find those tunnels, to destroy them and find some of the terrorists inside them. It's just been extraordinary work. That there are Americans and Israelis alive today because of the work you've done, and I just want to thank you publicly for that, and I admire so much what you've done. And let me just foot stomp again for Americans. This is another example how we are benefiting from our cooperation with Israel. There are drug tunnels and terror tunnels on our southern border that have been detected and destroyed because of our work with Israel. And that very same technology was used to detect ISIS tunnels as they were trying to tunnel closer to our troops in the Middle East, because we worked with Israel. So they're safer, we're safer, win-win. Yes, and so thank you for that detailed rundown. We need to invite you back for a full hour on that. And any quick comments? It was one of the other things that I'm proud to work on in the past is the U.S. Israel Operations Technology Working Group. You attend those meetings, you provide briefings because of the amazing work. Any quick comments on the working group and its important role as we go from one administration to the next?
Yeah, I think, Undersecretary Heidi Shue, combined with the head of DDR&D, Denny Gold, they have a great relationship. And I think we view the OTWG as the ability to understand and cooperate on these larger defense issues, whereas IWTSD is super tactical, right? We're developing those capabilities that go into an operator's hands tomorrow. But there are things like hypersonics and countering hypersonics. There is defeating airborne threats with things like Iron Beam that just exceed IWTSD's capabilities. That's exactly what OTWG is poised to do. And these are the kinds of topics that they cooperate on. Where they dip into the tactical realm with things like bioconvergence and countering unmanned systems, then we partner with them with our rapid execution and great friends across that Israeli interagency community to execute those topics as rapidly as possible. But Secretary Shue was a great partner, and I have no doubt that that's going to continue.
That's great. Thank you. Now, just for folks on Capitol Hill listening, I just remind them that the OPSTEC Working Group was authorized in the fiscal year 21 National Defense Authorization Act, I believe, Section 1299M. There's an annual report required from Congress by March 15th, and to hold this important organization that has done such great work underneath has done such great work in the past, accountable for continued great results, both for the United States and also for our great ally in the Middle East, Israel. Adam, in our final moments, what are some of your top priorities going forward?
Yeah, so enhancing the lethality and survivability of operators, especially tactical operators, that's job number one for us. So we follow what the warfighters ask for. We actually sort of turn the traditional mechanism on its head and ask those operators, under the strategic guidance provided by the Secretary, what do they need to do their jobs a little better? And then we work with our stakeholders, our international and interagency partners, to deliver that back to them through the innovative ecosystem and commercial entities as rapidly as possible. So we move where they move. We try to disrupt both innovation in the battle space and in the bureaucracy. We're looking at continued work on autonomy and robotic systems, countering unmanned systems, both undersea, on the ground, and in the air. We're doing AI and ML to enhance the signal-to-noise ratio that all of our sensors struggle with. AI, ML, algorithmic enhancements can make all of that more effective. And we continue with our age-old work in countering weapons of mass destruction and countering explosive devices and other things that terrorists are sadly continuing to use. And just to wrap up on my end, I want to thank you, because IWTSD is a sort of a small and lesser known organization. And we had friends like yourself and Senator Ayotte on the Hill and in the administrations as they've evolved over the decades. It makes a big difference. We're not so good at the marketing and self-aggrandizement as maybe we should be to get our name out there. So having some friends that know how to reach the public is a huge benefit. And I think there are a million lessons that we have learned over the 4 decades, and that Secretary Hegseth is really foot stomping now. But we've got to foster a culture that encourages the experimentation, accepts some of that risk of rapid failure as a small component of success, promotes iterative and collaborative approach to disruptive innovation in the bureaucracy, disruptive innovation in the battlefield. And a lot of that is done in the private sector. And we as the government can act as an intermediary between operators and innovators to ensure that they just get that little bit of gasoline that they need to turn that pre-minimum viable product into something an operator wants and can use in the field. So as we move our R&D landscape to focus more on what's rapidly important, IWTSD has been doing that for 40 years.
Adam, I sincerely, genuinely want to thank you and IWTSD for what you've done through the years to keep us and our allies safe. And I consider you a friend and a national treasure. And I think IWTSD is the epitome of what the Pentagon should be doing. So I just, from my humble foxhole here, you have my full support. If there's anything I can ever do to help you and the great team there, please let me know. And to viewers,
I think this is a big step.
Well, thank you. And to the viewers, let me just say, the zeitgeist right now is efficiency and stewardship. And that is right. That's exactly right. We have to make sure the U.S. government is spending every dollar well and making the most of it. But next time you hear conversations about Pentagon bloat, yes, there is some. I want you to remember Adam Tarsi and IDWTSD and his 407 projects that he just talked about and what they're doing, and realize that some things that should be cut and some things should not. And I think you've seen today an example of something that should not only not be cut, but should be fully supported, if not expanded. So thank you again, Adam.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate everything.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Fascinating stuff, folks. I can't think of 2 better people to talk about the U.S.-Israel relationship from a defense perspective. In the interest of time, we're going to call it a day, but if you're craving more, check out the expert analysis on our website, FDD.org. Read our quick takes on X at FTD, or check out our Instagram and YouTube channels. And please do make that tax-deductible donation at FDD.org/invest. Tune in Monday for another normal episode of the FDD Morning Brief. Our guest will be Henri Barkey of the Council on Foreign Relations. I caught up with him earlier this week to discuss Turkey's involvement in the new Syrian government, Trump's relationship with Turkish strongman Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and more. Henri has a brilliant mind and a robust bookshelf that rivals mine. So tune in, will you? Until then, Jonathan Schanzer here, signing off for FDD.